Are you ready to be vaccinated? If you have not already been vaccinated, are you ready? As of the close of business this past week, 68% of us, roughly two-thirds, have been given at least one dose of the various vaccines out there. 59% of us have been fully vaccinated, which means over 40% of us, for whatever reason, have chosen not to be vaccinated against COVID-19. So those numbers are not particularly pleasing to the Biden administration. They have made it their goal to get everybody vaxxed, or at least get to herd immunity, which probably means everybody vaxxed, because herd immunity, led by that chief herder, Tony Fauci, is a constantly moving number. And now companies are going to be penalized starting in January if every one of their employees is not vaccinated or tested weekly for COVID or wearing a mask. Every company, we were told initially, with over 100 employees, but now it looks like, kind of like herd immunity, that goalpost is moving again for the Biden administration. Now, because of this mandate to get vaxxed and the penalties for the companies that don't have everybody fully vaccinated or tested on a weekly basis, 26 states are now suing the Biden administration, claiming that this particular tactic, which he is using under OSHA guidelines, is unconstitutional. They don't care about what's constitutional in the White House these days. They don't care. They'll do this, they'll inflict pain, and then when that pain is inflicted, whether or not it stands up in the Supreme Court, they don't care. Because this is the one thing that this administration is winning on in the minds of the public. How Biden is handling COVID. It's certainly not the border, it's certainly not Afghanistan, it's certainly not the economy, it's certainly not fuel prices. Because this is the one win they can get. And so now companies, even in this tight labor market, are going to be penalized. Standing by to weigh in on all of this is a guy that we have on this show quite a bit. I like Paul Seegert because he speaks truth, and he speaks truth to you and me. He is managing partner at PCS Advisers. It's a benefits consulting firm with 35 partner offices across the nation. He's with us now on 700 WLW. Paul, how are you on this glorious Saturday?
I'm doing great, Ken. How are you?
What do you make of this? That now it's not necessarily for businesses employing 100 or more, that it may be for businesses that employ less than that, and that they're doing this under the guise of some sort of rule that OSHA has, the Occupational Safety Hazard group that oversees businesses coast to coast. What do you make of all of this?
Well, they're using this emergency temporary standard authority, which they don't use very often. I think it hasn't been used since 1994. And if you look at the last 9 times they made one of these emergency standards, 6 of them did not hold up once they were challenged in court, either fully or at all. So it's an interesting route for the Biden administration to take, especially since before the mandate, the presidentially announced mandate, 85% of employers said they were going to have some sort of policy around vaccines by the end of the year anyway. And I mean, actually my position is, and feedback we've gotten from many employers, is that it kind of slowed that process because they didn't want to invest in putting in a policy that then wouldn't match with the OSHA rule. And so then they'd have spent time and money and then have to scrap it and go back and start over based on the OSHA rule. So it's kind of, I think, delayed it in a way, ironically.
Yeah. Look, no, but this isn't a debate over whether or not you should get vaccinated. This isn't a debate over whether or not it's the prudent thing to do to fight off COVID. This is a debate over overreach, and I think particularly in the economic environment that we're in right now with the employment situation in this country. And I know there was a robust jobs report that came out last week. I think if you drill down, you find that a lot of the reasons for those robust jobs reports are not quite as was presented by the administration, and that the unemployment number is significantly impacted by people who have just simply given up going to work or don't want to go to work. So, I mean, I understand the backdrop this is all in. But it seems to me in an environment where everybody is under stress, particularly in business, this is just the wrong touch. And there's a reason, Paul, why almost 40% of this country still has not been vaccinated. And I'm not sure taking away their ability to earn money and feed their families is the way to go about this process. It seems ham-handed to me. Does it seem that way to you?
Well, it does, and it's another in a series of policies that have affected smaller employers in a much more difficult way than larger employers. I mean, you look at United Airlines with 67,000 people. If in the end they have to shed 2,000 or 3,000 employees, that's a little more manageable than an employer with 110 people. I was speaking with an employer that we work with that's at the smaller end of this range, and they have very skilled labor, machinists and this kind of thing, the kind of skilled labor that a lot of young people aren't going into anymore. And they have a pretty vaccine-hesitant workforce, but they have federal contracts. Mm-hmm. So they now have lost, in the last, just this past week, a handful of very critical employees. And those skilled employees can go get a job elsewhere at a company that's maybe not yet affected by this. And so that's putting them in a real squeeze. And that's a pretty consistent kind of feedback that we get from employers that are at the smaller end of the range, that it's not as easy for them to budget a program, to provide for testing. Now, the OSHA rule that we now just got access to does not require the companies to pay for testing, but as you pointed out, they're already in a tough hiring environment.
Right.
So
right.
I think they'll be obligated to do so. And that's going to add $20 to $120 per person per week that doesn't want to do it, and then the PPE, and then the monitoring of it with an HR department that's already typically overloaded. It's going to be a really difficult hoop to jump through for these smaller employers.
You know, we live in a litigious society. I mentioned that 26 states have already gone to court to stop the Biden administration from going through with this. You mentioned earlier that a lot of companies have slowed the process as to what to do if indeed this plan is either put in place, shot down, reinvented, put back in place. It would seem to me in the society that we live in right now that there might be a path, and I don't know. I know you're not a lawyer, I'm not either. But there might be a path for an employee who is forced to get vaccinated under this guise that OSHA requires it, that the Biden administration is enforcing it. There may be a pathway legally for them to come back if indeed this guise is shot down by the Supreme Court. There may be a pathway for that employee to come back at his employer for this. I mean, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. Do you?
Well, it's certainly not. I mean, I believe it will certainly be attempted, and that in and of itself is a cost for all parties involved. And when you look at these emergency temporary standard authorities, that what they have to prove or be based upon is grave danger, and they have to be able to show OSHA in this case that it's necessary to save lives. And I think they're saying that they expect it'll save 6,500 lives. This is I'm not to sound callous, but this is quite a significant move for all of these employers to have to take. And I don't know if once this thing gets challenged in court, if that will hold up to the grave danger portion, because there's not a lot of case law that really establishes that.
Look, anything that saves one life, I think everybody would be in favor for in an antiseptic and a sterile environment and in a vacuum. No question about it. Right. 6,500 lives for all of this when you have 40% of the country that for whatever reason doesn't want to be fully vaccinated, a third of the country that's only been partially vaccinated. So we won't even get into who's getting booster shots now and who isn't. And now you're going to take away their livelihood. I think this is nonsensical. What do you figure the end game is here for the administration? What do you think that Biden is trying to get done here? Why would he go about it this way? What's the grief to dollar reward for him on this?
Well, I think, by the time this rule is in effect for the 6 months and it gets fought out, you alluded to it a little bit earlier, many people will already have been vaccinated, because we are seeing that when employers or states for certain groups of employees put in mandates, by and large, the people do end up getting vaccinated because they are faced with a pretty crazy decision. Do I support my family, or do I? Because not everybody is that skilled machinist that can go down the street and get another job. And so I think the end game is, even if it doesn't hold up to legal challenge, it'll have accomplished the goal. And that's what I expect to see. Now, you mentioned, there's 26 states. We have a country where you either fall directly under OSHA, or you have a state authority that is like OSHA, and then they're split about 50-50. So a lot of the states that are most vocally against this, Texas, Florida, Montana, as examples, they actually don't have their own state version of OSHA. They fall directly under OSHA's jurisdiction. So the reading I've done would indicate that they maybe have a weaker legal basis for challenge because of that, or at least in the short run. So it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. Again, we're in unprecedented territory, and we're going to be watching this thing evolve quickly over the next few months.
I mentioned the stats, and again, these are stats that are current as of close of business on Friday. 68% one dose. About a third of the country still has not received any dose. 60% fully vaccinated, so that means 40% of this country is not fully vaccinated. The hesitancy is on a number of different levels. It's being forced to do something that somebody doesn't want to do. You got that group. You have those that have legitimate concerns medically, legitimate concerns religiously. We still don't know what herd immunity is. It started out at 70%, that morphed into 85%, and now you don't hear anybody, including Tony Fauci, talking about it. I don't know what the end game is for the country. I really don't. At the end of it all, when you've got if this is going to help 6,500 people live with a disease that is plummeting in terms of its morbidity and its hospitalizations, it's going to save 6,500 lives. What's the end number here? What do we get to when everybody is pleased? Because 100% of anything doesn't happen. Doesn't exist in any walk of life.
Right.
Well, so what's the end game here?
Well, I think there's another ironic part of this. The end game is we're getting there either way. Herd immunity is something you get to either way with something like this, whether it's through vaccination or natural infection. And we still don't do a good job recognizing that. Many studies have shown that it is a real thing. And to me, one of the most interesting articles that came out this week was Dr. Gottlieb, who's a former head of the FDA and now a board member for Pfizer, said that the pandemic is functionally over. That by the time this mandate goes in, it will be going in at the end of the pandemic. That were his words, a board member of Pfizer who's the head of the FDA.
Right.
I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah. Board member of Pfizer that has already made $35 billion on a vaccine and standing to make billions and billions more on a booster
therapeutic
shot.
pills that they've come up with, too, between Pfizer and Merck. Now they both have these antiviral drugs that are, protease inhibitors similar to HIV drugs that have shown themselves to be very effective against hospitalization and death.
Yeah. Yeah, it's to me, again, this is ham-handed in the environment that we live in, but nevertheless, it's going to go to court, and we'll see exactly.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, and it's not going to go to court anytime soon, and along the way, you're going to get a lot of businesses that are going to be whacked because they either have to let employees go, as you say, that they value, or because they're going to get fined by Washington, D.C. One way or the other, they seem to get your money. They wind up getting your money, don't they, Paul? One way or the other.
Well, they do, but I'll tell you what, they've got 8 million work sites to keep an eye on right now, OSHA that is, and they have less than 2,000 people to go inspect. So they're, it's not like they've got the troops on the ground to really go pop in at every business.
On the road to hiring 85,000 new IRS agents, what the hell? Why don't we hire another 80,000 OSHA people and they'll get our money that way? Paul Seegert, always great catching up with you. You stay well. We'll talk down the road.